the great strength of the Ukrainian forces, let's be clear about this, it's not necessarily they could outgun and do this. They are so much better organized. They are organized because they have devolved responsibility in command. That means people, professional, amateur, and in between, are doing their own thing in a way that the Russians don't understand. I think sometimes even their political command in Kiev doesn't understand. But in fact, in the way to run a pro-am operation of self-defense and insurgency before it becomes a full insurgency, it's brilliant.
Well, let's continue talking about Ukraine. We are hearing that there is a humanitarian corridor which has been opened up to allow people to try and get out of Mariupol. Joining us now is Robert Fox, defence editor at the Evening Standard. Good afternoon, Robert.
Good afternoon.
First of all, your reaction just to the story we just heard, which, to me, it's just so chilling, but I suppose it is a horrible reality of war.
And particularly in that part of the world, these sort of atrocities against women, gratuitous, particularly during the terrible fighting in Ukraine between 41 and 45. Ukraine took 40% of the Soviet Union's casualties in that time, including gratuitous massacre of groups of people, of unarmed civilians, pogroms, and of course rape. And of course, we have seen this as a weapon, as you rightly say, in the Balkans and in Africa as well. It is an unfortunate, terrible accompaniment of this kind of war. It is yet another symptom, I think, of really bad disciplinary conditions. There are reports from both sides, it must be said, but particularly the breakdown of discipline in the Russian infantry from quite early stages in getting to Kiev, gratuitous killing of civilians, taking revenge against them. And I think there are two components in that. One is that the Russians did not expect the civil resistance. They did not expect territorial defenders to be so good, and very good they were in places. So any civilian becomes an enemy. And I'm terribly sorry to say, but we Brits have been much too pious about this. There is very strong communal, ethnic, not really so ethnic, but it's cultural hatred and competition. And this is the thing that Vladimir Putin was playing on when he launched this attack on Ukraine. And he was launching it on Ukrainian identity and culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you mentioned the word feral before in terms of how these forces are behaving. Well, Robert,
Indeed.
Let's have a broader look. How confident are you that this attempted humanitarian corridor out of Mariupol will be successful?
I'm not confident at all, Ayesha, I'm sorry to say, because Mariupol has had a terrible time. People have been living in terrible conditions underground there. And I don't mean to explain away, but let's explain it. Mariupol was supposed to have been captured within 48, 72 hours of this campaign being launched by Putin. And this is why it is such a symbol. I heard from right-wing supporters on a Gulf television station in which I was in a discussion this morning, Mariupol had fallen. I said, no, it hasn't, because the fighting still continues there. And the Azov-style steel complex is a real propaganda thorn for the Russians, because I suspect it's beginning to get out into the general information pool, social media and otherwise, right across Russia now.
So where do you think this is? So what do you think is going to happen? There will be an attempt to keep it open, and then what the Russians will break the sort of partial ceasefire to allow people out?
I think that, yes, because I think that the Azov Brigade, who are tough, who are that they will continue as long as there's a propaganda advantage. What they are doing very successfully, we're supposed to be having a massive, much bigger second phase of the Putin operation to take Donbass. Now, there is a lot of fighting. There is a lot of shelling. Very important, a lot of shelling. Not much occupying and taking over new territory, new towns. And what the Ukrainians are doing is that they're soaking up the Russian effort. I just want to explain briefly that you take towns with tanks and infantry. They're not getting them in there. They've only got them into one or two places. and they're blasting away with artillery and rockets. They don't take cities. They smash cities up. That's all. And what I think you're going to hear in the next few days, and I think it will come out on the victory parade a week tomorrow, is that they have liberated Kherson and they'll have a phony referendum there, and you will hear the independent Republic of Kherson, which wants to join itself to the Russian Federation. Well, they've already today, the news there, they've tried to introduce the ruble. And the good citizens of Kherson are absolutely refusing to use rubles.
And finally, Robert, talk to us about what's happening in Moldova Transnistria. What do we know about the attacks there, and what do we think we can deduce from these attacks?
Well, we're not absolutely 100% clear. There is a breakaway zone, as you say, of Transnistria, where there is a Russian military presence of between about 1,500 and 2,500. They're not particularly crack troops, and they're not very well equipped. So the Putin boast is that we're all going to link up and we're going to cut the Ukrainians off from the sea, because from Mariupol through to Transnistria, through Odessa, we will possess this area. It's a very, very dangerous boast to make. The explosions, fascinating, what you've just said. We still haven't got to the bottom of it, but it smells awfully like one of these false flag operations, which, of course, the past master at it is one Vladimir Putin.
Of course.
Because he kicked off in Chechnya in 1999 with those bombings of flats in Moscow. What is happening is that they know that as far as the world is concerned, the story is not going too well for Russia. And the problem is, and I think it's beautifully summed up in that well-known tabloid, the front page of The Economist this week. It's absolutely superb. What has gone wrong? How rotten are Russian forces? Because the great strength of the Ukrainian forces, let's be clear about this, it's not necessarily they can outgun and do this. They are so much better organized. They are organized because they have devolved responsibility in command. That means people, professional, amateur, and in between, are doing their own thing in a way that the Russians don't understand. I think sometimes even their political command in Kiev doesn't understand. But in fact, in the way to run a pro-am operation of self-defense and insurgency before it becomes a full insurgency, it's brilliant.
Well, Robert, it's always fantastic to speak with you. Always great to get your insight. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon. That's Robert Fox, defence editor at the Evening Standard. And as Robert was saying, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the May Day parades and how President Putin spins what's happening. That's going to be an important date to keep an eye out for.